Oi, oi, it's your boy Jack Slack, and this is the Jack Slack podcast, and this is the episode where we discuss my failed Hades 2 builds, least successful to most successful. Because God knows how I'm going to get more than 5 minutes out of this dog shit UFC card. What was that? Most of the excitement this week was watching the news come out that they just hadn't sold any tickets. They got people to travel halfway across the country or entirely across the country to attend the Perth events when it was Duplessis versus Adesanya or Makachev versus Volkanovski. But they didn't reckon with the notion that people might have cared who was fighting. And apparently more than half of these tickets weren't sold and were heavily, heavily marked down by the time of the fights. If you don't know, Perth is a billion miles away from everything else in Australia. So people going to those previous events, that was a commitment. That was them doing something because they loved the sport and they loved the matchups. People don't just go there to watch shite. And if all you're bringing 3 ranked fighters on this card, and I'm going to say only 2 because you won't even know who the third one is, it's Loma Lookboonmee. And that was the first fight of the night. And to be fair play to the hardcores in Perth, because there were some people in there at 7 a.m. local time, already had a few cans, cheering on a fairly uneventful women's strawweight fight between Loma Lookboonmee and the new lass who's actually quite good, Alexia Tainara. And it's even funnier because they went up against the AFL, the Australian Football League final, the same weekend, which all Aussies are mad about. And it's even funnier because Western Australia, the government of Western Australia, pays the UFC millions to bring this shite to their town. And I presume they're paying them the same for this as they did for the pay-per-views. So most of my week was spent not really caring about this event and, getting into the odd argument with the owner of Combate Global, the only CEO in professional sports who will see you joking about him on Twitter and then message you on LinkedIn to say he doesn't use Twitter, but he's fine about that joke, and then get back on Twitter to tell me how much he doesn't care. They're one of those fighting organizations. If you've never heard of Combate Global, it's because they are on the gym channel. They're on the channel that is left on at the gym. So their ratings stay the same the entire time. And they have no fighters. They have rankings on their websites, but all their belts seem to be vacant, or at least their website and Wikipedia say so. And they're one of those fight organizations that's like, don't judge our fight organization for its lack of world-class fighters. Judge us as a business where everyone in the C-suite can be baited into an argument on Twitter for hours at a time. Still more legit than one championship, though. There's that. UFC, Ulberg versus Dominic Reyes. I took the opportunity this week to talk about Lazarus-style comebacks in combat sports, jumping off from Dominic Reyes, because I didn't have a lot to say about Dominic Reyes, because I thought that his comeback was partly due to the fact, or mainly due to the fact, that he had a massive step down in opposition. That light heavyweight is basically dead at the moment. He was still getting caught with the same punches, he just wasn't getting knocked out. So maybe magical improvement in the chin. He did take 2 years off after that Ryan Spann knockout, and time off can do wonders for your ability to absorb blows. That's why I think that Andre Petroski should take the next 20 to 25 years off. But honestly, I was impressed by Ulberg, I was depressed by Reyes, but it wasn't as bad Reyes-wise as I thought it was going to be. When we were talking about this fight, I was saying, both of them like to draw the other guy onto counterpunches. They're both these big, tall guys who land these counterpunches, and they do kind of rely on being tall. The Dominic Reyes special is to circle out to his left as the guy's throwing their right hand, and then throw his left hand over the top of it. Hopefully they've fallen short. If he gets caught against the fence, he gets hit by the right hand anyway. But then against Jacoby, that's exactly what happened. He got the right hand. He ate the right hand along the fence, came back with left hand over the top, and stunned Jacoby and got the finish. But he likes drawing people out and trying to throw that left hand across the top of their right, or as they're retracting their right. Doesn't do that well going forwards, which was weird because Dominic Cruz was there going, oh, Reyes, he loves going forwards, he does. And you're watching him awkwardly try to work out how to go forwards without without opening up at all. So he's showing lots of feints and then not really following up. So there's several points in that fight. It's only a short fight, but there's several points where he hip fakes, stops, and Ulberg just jabs him for not following up. Then he threw the odd left kick and Ulberg took it on the right forearm and jabbed up the middle, which is a lovely move to do. And eventually he got caught just sort of lumbering after Ulberg. He went to lunge in again. I don't think he even threw a punch. I think he faked again and sort of stepped forward and didn't do anything. And Ulberg hit him with a 1-2 and knocked him out. But I thought Ulberg looked great. I really like... He has had some issues, in the past with defense and with being reliant on his height and reach to protect him. He's had some... he does a lot of leaning with his jabs and things. He does a lot of leaning back from the opponent's blows. There were people showing clips of him this week being like, how is this a top light heavyweight with this striking? But in this one, against a guy who was equally tall and equally long, I thought he looked really... And who wanted to counterpunch him. He looked very cautious and clever. And so he's throwing like a slappy left hook to take down the lead hand, moving in as deep as possible and throwing the right straight to the body with his head outside of Reyes' body so that he couldn't get caught with that left hand across the top. And then he'd hang back a bit and then he'd go for the deep step into the right straight to the body again. Never got caught like chasing Reyes. He was either drawing him out or putting him under sort of cautious pressure. And ultimately, I thought he just looked pretty good. He's been on my list for a while as like someone to watch, in the same way that Ankalaev was, where I was like, I'm not super impressed, but in this division, that's about as good a prospect as we're getting. So we got Ankalaev versus Pereira this coming weekend, and then I presume Ulberg gets whoever wins that. What else was on this pile of trash card? Jimmy Crute versus Ivan Erslan. I mean, if you want to see how bad 205 is, Jimmy Crute's striking is throw the calf kick, absorb 2 punches as you're on one leg, and then circle off and try the calf kick again, and it works. He's just getting his head popped back like a Pez dispenser as he chops away at this lead leg. Can't remember how it even got to the mat, but he got to the mat and then Reyesurgeance choked him. Is Jimmy Crute, should he be in a co-main event of a UFC card in a stadium? Hell no. But, if people turn up for it, that's on them. Jack Jenkins versus Raymond Tavares was fine. I mean, I don't have an awful lot to say. The one cool moment was that Jack Jenkins threw... he was orthodox versus a southpaw. He threw a right high kick on the arm. He'd thrown a ton of them, actually. But then he went to throw it again and kept his knee bent so that he could pass his leg all the way in front of Tavares and hit that cross buttock Osotogari, kick the back heel their leg out throw that Piotr Yan and John Jones and Zabit Magomed Sharipov do. And I think Volk did it against Diego Lopez. So that was cool. Neil Magny versus Jake Matthews, very funny whenever anyone fights Neil Magny and doesn't throw a low kick. I think he threw a couple in the first, but the stats at the end said he landed like 4 of 4 and didn't throw anymore because Jake Matthews is utterly convinced that he's an elite boxer now. But his ground game looked great. If you read submission Darst choke, you normally think, probably shot a crappy shot and got sprawled on and Darst. But he was dominating the grappling for most of this fight. In the first round, he was taken down, but he attached himself to a guillotine that was so threatening that Neil Magny had to roll basically to be mounted. He rolled over and gave Jake Matthews the mount, which is always impressive. And I knew Jake Matthews had a good guillotine because I've seen him use it a couple of times before. Obviously, the leech thumbed his eye to get out of it very famously. I don't know if he actually got any wins by it, but I've seen him use it a lot. But you could tell it was a legit guillotine because in round 2, Neil Magny shot. Jake Matthews loosely wrapped his head. He had one hand on the back of Magny's head and one hand under his chin. Just got the chin strap. And Magny dropped to the floor and shelled up completely from a shot, which was crazy. He just sort of gave up and went, oh no, please don't choke me. And the wonderful thing about that, the old Tony Ferguson 2-step, the dilemma is if someone is reaching for your legs and you sprawl on them, you've got a good chance of opening up their neck and choking them, or collecting an arm with their neck and hitting a Darce or an Anaconda, or some variant of necktie, if you're feeling funky. But if they keep their arms in and everything tight and they're fighting your hands off their chin, or neck rather, you can normally run straight around to their back, because in wrestling, what keeps the guy from running to your back is you having your arms around his legs, or in front of one of his legs. So Jake Matthews ran around to the back, got on the back, ended up on top in a mounted triangle, punching Neil Magny in the face. He was losing that mounted triangle, and he put his own foot back into Neil Magny's guard so that he could slide over the top and land in they sometimes call it the negativa half guard, the reverse half guard. which was really cool. Like, he realized he was losing the position, and he gave Neil Magny a little bit of an escape to land in control. He's always been real good on the ground, Jake Matthews, and this recent resurgence has been sort of him just discovering his boxing again. But, yeah, third round he got tired, and it was honestly a pretty good call from Magny's corner, because he went back to his corner after being dominated for round 2. His cornerman stumbled over some advice that was like, he's sitting still on top of you because he's tired, so go out and make the most of that. And I thought, yeah, they're just telling Magny that because they desperately need him to work and he's losing the fight. But Magny went after him in the third round, and Matthews was like pushed to the fence, not doing much, and Magny was able to snap him down a couple of times, get on his neck, get almost mounted him along the fence. Actually did mount him along the fence, and then Matthews came up off the escape and got darsed. So, yeah, he was getting tired. Good read by Magny's corner. Or good work by them if they just knew that that was the only way they'd get anything out of Magny. Anything else on this? People were talking about Tom Nolan's win by rear naked choke against Charlie Campbell. I was watching this fight and I was like, oh, this is a bit of a sloppy mess. And then I realized it was 155. I was just like, oh my God, how do these guys hang in that weight class with how deep it is if they're fighting like this? Granted, they're both huge dudes. They were Nolan's 6'3", Campbell's 6 foot. That's big for lightweight, so you're going to be incubated by that a lot. A lot of the time when you get two tall guys who rely on that facing each other, it's sloppy and they both look really bad defensively. But, man, this was all over the fucking place. Cam Roston versus Andre Petroski was just ridiculous. Petroski's always had a shaky chin, and his results haven't always, like, you know, sometimes you know someone's got a bad chin, but you can't point to their record because it's got loads of knockouts. It's just instances of them getting hit in fights and looking wobbly by, like, not particularly hard shots. Petroski had been knocked out by Michel Pereira, but Jacob Malkoun, the official record says ground strikes after a hard collision. He headbutted Malkoun's hip and knocked himself out, basically. This guy has a bit of a shaky chin. And the thing about fighting is, like, there's a lot of things you can change about yourself and improve about yourself, but if you cannot take a decent blow from someone your own size and weight, or, you know, someone on the big end of your weight class, it's just going to be really hard to hide it. There have been guys who can, but even the best defensive fighters in the world, you tend to find out after you do catch them dead to rights that they've also got a pretty solid chin, and that's always demoralizing when that happens. But Cam Roston slapped him, basically. Like, it was not even a big connect. It's an arm swing. A second in a row, I think. He throws it like a slappy left hook twice. And Petroski takes it on the temple and just folds. Now, he's had a ton of success as a grappler in MMA, and you know, this is what's his... Or he's had good success. You know, he's beaten Josh Frem, Dylan Budka, even, obviously, Rodolfo Vieira, who's one of the all-time greats in grappling. But I would say that if these sort of shots are putting you out, try a weight class up, or give up on this sport. Just grapple full-time. Because these were not hard shots that put him out. And whenever you say this about someone's chin, someone will go, I'd like to see you take that. And it's like, I'm not saying I could take any sort of shots, but if it's your career choice to be in a sport where you will be hit with much harder shots than that, and you fold when you get hit by shots like that, or you collapse and lose the round, it's time to get out. But then I've been saying that about Rob Font for years, and he's still here. Winning, even. And the only other thing that's probably notable happening on here is the other ranked fighter on the card, Loma Lookboonmee, lost to Alexia Tainara. I think this is Tainara's second fight in the UFC, but she looked all right, actually. I mean, she did win via Loma Lookboonmee being a 40-kilo girl competing at strawweight. Like, Loma Lookboonmee is smaller than an atomweight. She's tiny. But in fairness to Tainara, she did exactly what she should do. Anytime that Lookboonmee kicked, she stuck to the kick and took her down, which a lot of Lookboonmee's opponents haven't been able to do. They often get elbowed as they try and do that, and she's pretty strong in the clinch, even though she's small, kind of like Michelle Waterson, always punched far above her weight in clinch exchanges, in terms of, like, wrestling, not actually punching people, because she didn't do an awful lot of that successfully. Tainara also landed a decent elbow on Lookboonmee in the first round that had her stumbling, or had her stumble as she was attempting a trip. And then there was this cool, like, the post single, I call it, when you push the lead shoulder and reach behind the lead knee, so that as you push them back, the knee just comes up into your hand and you get a nice single leg. Frankie Edgar, it was his bread and butter. But she did that, and then she let go of it and did a back kick off it, which was gorgeous. Loved it. Love a good shove to spin in any combat sport, in any iteration. So yeah, bad card. I hope that the reason the Combate Globals guys were mad at me was because I said, oh, it's good that card's not selling very well, because the MMA press loves to shit on the UFC or the Noble Company or whatever. But, you know, how are you allowed to express your distaste with the current matchmaking and event booking? You know, I like the sport. I want to see the good fighters in the good fights. I think it's 1 in 3 ranked fighters is currently booked for the rest of the year. You got 8 men's divisions, 3 women's divisions. You got 15 ranked fighters, then a champion in each of those divisions. So that's 16 people. 16 times 11, and we're still getting stadium cards with 3 ranked fighters on in 12 or 13 fights or whatever it is. You know, just things used to be better. Things should be better. Am I not allowed to root for the UFC to not be able to sell out stadiums when they're being paid to go there in the first place by the government, when they put on cards like this? I don't know. Maybe I'm the jerk here. But I am your boy, and I'll catch you later in the week. Jack Della Maddalena, save us, bless.